Welcome to this evening's Torah 101. And tonight we're going to be speaking about, we're going to go through the parashat called Vayetze, and he went out. So let me share the screen so that we can get right into it, because it's a wonderful story. I love it. So last week we had the Jacob leaving, running away because he was afraid that Esau was going to kill him. That's what his mother, Rebecca, told him to do. And his father, Isaac, agreed. And it says, and Jacob went out from Beersheba. I love that because I have a friend who lives in Beersheba to know it's just so old, so ancient. And he went toward Haran, which was where the servant went to get a wife for Isaac, whose name was Rebecca. Now that's his mother. So now we're in the next generation. And he lighted upon the place and tarried there all night because the sun was set. And he took one of the stones of the place. Now here it says, and I honestly don't understand why, because this is a Hebrew Bible. It's not a Christian Bible or any other Bible. And they put it under his head. In another version I saw, he took the stone and put it as a pillow. Now, I don't know anyone who would use a stone as a pillow, but we'll see that the word that's used for these stones is called a matseva. And a matseva is what is used when a person dies in a Jewish family, and they have a stone that's put up with their name on it so that they'll always know where they are. In this particular case, in the desert, if you went to sleep, you had to protect yourself. And he would have put a stone behind his head so that he would protect himself from scorpions, from snakes, from other predators that would come and try to bite him in his head. So he put the pillow behind his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. Behold, the angels of God ascending and descending on it. Now, this is interesting because if you think about it, the angels ascended. It doesn't say descended and ascended, but they were on the earth. They ascended, they went up, and they came down. And it's a picture that God was showing him that he would always be with him, that he had nothing to fear. He would send his angels before him. And behold, the Lord stood beside him and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. Interesting that he doesn't say your father for Isaac. Well, there's different opinions about that. The land on which you're lying, I will give to you and to your seed. And your seed shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. There's a song that we sing about that. Ufaratsta, 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 ufaratsta. And it's all about, that's just how we are today. We're all over the world, spread to the west, to the east, to the north and south. And in you and in your seed shall all the families of the earth be blessed. And we are part of that seed. It's so exciting. And behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you of. Now, we know that that's not done yet. So this was like 4,000 years ago. God's time, we say a day is like 1,000 years. No, 1,000 years is like one day to God. And this still hasn't come about. But it says, I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done all that I have spoken to you of. And Jacob awoke out of his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it. And he was afraid. And he said, I don't think he was afraid like fearful, but it was more awesome, an awesome fear, and said, How full of awe is this place? There is none other than this is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. So the house of God is Beit El, and the gate of heaven is Sha'ar HaShemayim. We have a synagogue here in Montreal called Sha'ar HaShemayim, which is probably where they took the name. And Jacob rose up early in the morning. He took a stone that he put behind his head, and he made a pillar. Here you'll see it says, Matzeva. He made a pillar, and he poured oil upon it. It says, Vayetze shemen al rosha. He put oil on top of it. And he called the name of that place, as he said before, Bet El, house of God. But the name of that city at first was called Luz. I don't know if it means light, but it was now changed to Bethel. I looked up where is Bethel today, and it's in a section north of Jerusalem that is where Arabs have the that land. I think it's called Beitin today. Excuse me, I don't know what's happening with my voice tonight. And it's mentioned throughout the scriptures 62 times. That's how important that city is. And one day, and he says, and Jacob vowed a vow, saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, this matzeva, which I have set up as a pillar, shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. So when he was speaking here, remember, he had run away from home. He had nothing. It was very different than when the servant of Abraham went to find a wife for Isaac. He went with many gifts and money, and they knew when he came that he was wealthy. But with Jacob, it was very different. He left with nothing. So that's why he's saying, if God will give these things to me, because I don't have anything, then I can give back to you. And it's a picture for us. When we are blessed, when God gives to us, we need to remember that it wasn't us who yes, we work hard, just the way Jacob will work hard, but unless God allows it, we are not blessed. And it says here, I will surely give a tenth to you, which is where the idea of tithing comes in. So when we receive from God, it's important to always give back, and give back to the community, give back to the people who are teaching you spiritually. Chapter 29. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of, it says, Bnei Kedem, the children of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field. And there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks. And the stone upon the well's mouth was great. In other words, it was very heavy. It took all the shepherds to push back that stone. And there all the flocks gathered. And there they rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the sheep, and then they would put the stone back upon the well's mouth in its place. And Jacob said to them, my brothers, who are you? Like, where do you come from? And they said, we're from Haran. And he said to them, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? And they said, we know him. And he said to them, is it well with him? And they said, it's well. And behold, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep. It reminds me of the story of what happened when his servant went to that well and Rebecca came. It's interesting how these stories are repeated, and they always have a beautiful picture behind them. And he said, well, for me, the picture is that God is behind everything, and that he arranges He arranges these things in our lives. It's wonderful, whether we know it or not. And he said, behold, it's yet high day. It's hot. It's not time for the cattle to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go and feed them. And they said, we can't until all the flocks are gathered together. And they roll the stone from the well's mouth. Then we water the sheep, because it took a lot of them to water the sheep. And they waited till it was a little bit, not like high noon, till it would cool down a little bit. While he was yet speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, and she was tending them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban. Now look at this. This is going to be repeated 3 times. When Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother. So his mother is Rebekah, and Laban is his brother. The sheep of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And I wondered, why would that be repeated 3 times? And so there were different opinions, as usual, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. And one that made sense to me was that Jacob wanted to honor his mother, not his brother, who he didn't know yet, actually. He wanted to honor his mother. And he was motivated by the family and he wanted the neighbors, all those people who were around there, to know that he was family, that he was coming from his mother to visit her brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel. He's pretty forward. But I guess it's not that kind of kiss. And he lifted up his voice and he wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him. He was excited. More gelt coming. And he embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. It was interesting when I read that about my bone and my flesh. I thought of Adam and Eve, where she was bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. We're family.
Just one thing, before I didn't understand Laban is Rebekah's brother, right?
Yes.
I'm getting that. And their father, why did just go? Yeah, and Rachel to here, and Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's. Wait, her father is her brother is Laban.
Her father, I think, is Bethuel.
And that's not Jacob's brother. Right?
No, you know what? It could be Laban. Jacob told Rachel, that he was her father's brother. You know what? I read it several times, Miriam, and honestly, I didn't know what it meant. And to tell you the truth, at that point, I was so tired. I just went to bed and I was going to come back to it today, but I had too many appointments. Okay. But I would be really interested in doing a little research and finding out what this meant. I
just want to read one. Jacob told Rachel, that he was her father's brother. Her father is Bethuel.
I think it was Bethuel.
Okay, and her brother is Laban. And Jacob told Rachel that
Rachel and Laban were.
Maybe he meant as a relative.
I have a feeling. I have a feeling that was
family.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. That's what sounds reasonable to me. But I have to look that up. And if you have a chance, look it up and we'll see if anybody who's watching has any comments. Please write to us and let us know what you think about this, because we're reading this together. And each time I read it, I see something new, but I certainly don't know everything. And there's so much to learn. But that's a good question, Miriam. And I thought the same thing. Okay. So it came to pass when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. Oh, yeah, we were there already. Okay, 15. And Laban said to Jacob, because you are my brother, which is like family. I guess that's what it means up there. You see, it's the same thing here, Miriam. He's not literally his brother, but it's like.
Oh, but I'm saying, I thought I'm on mute. Yeah, well, here is the answer.
Exactly.
He calls him his brother.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's the answer.
Exactly. It's like, you're my sister.
Right.
Yeah. Because you're my brother, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your wages be? Now, Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the youngest was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak. Now, here there are different opinions about what it meant that her eyes were weak. I don't know if she wore glasses. I don't know if they had glasses then. I don't know if she couldn't see well. I don't know if she wasn't pretty, or she was very quiet, very soft-spoken, tender. But she obviously wasn't the one that Jacob was in love with. But Rachel was a beautiful, beautiful form and fair to look on. So it probably means that Leah wasn't.
Right.
And Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than I should give her to another man. Come and live with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. And they seemed to him but a few days because of the love that he had for her. And Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my days are filled that I might go into her. That's basically how they were married in those days. There were no big weddings, not a whole Ganze Megillah. He took her into the tent and that was it. They were married. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. They had a celebration. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to him. And he went into her. Now, in this is a huge picture for us to remember. Do you remember how Jacob was accused of stealing the birthright of the first of his older brother, Esau? Here, the older sister is given to him instead of the younger one. It's like midah keneged midah, measure for measure. What we get is what we give. And Laban gave Zilpah, his handmaid, unto his daughter Leah for a handmaid. So Laban gave her a servant. And it came to pass in the morning, that would have been great. I wish my father-in-law would have given me a servant when I got married. And it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. I don't know what happened to him that night, how he didn't know. And he said,
what? Feasting and wine. And,
I guess he was really drunk. I don't know. What is this you've done to me? I guess they had no lights in their house. No light in the tent. Didn't I serve you for Leah? Why have you beguiled me? Why have you deceived me? This whole idea of deception in that family, you'll see over and over. Remember, Rebecca was Laban's sister. She was brought up in that soil of deception. That's why to her, it wasn't a big deal to deceive for Jacob to deceive his father, where he put the skins, on his hands so that his father, Isaac, would think he was Esau and fool him to get the blessing. So this is where she learned it. This was the soil in which she was brought up. And Laban said, it is not so done in our place to give the younger before the firstborn. Well, you'd think he would have told him that 7 years before. Fulfill the week of this one. Now, in Hebrew, the week can either mean another 7 years, or a literal, a week. And we will give you the other for the service which you shall serve me with yet another 7 years. So he would serve 7 years, but I have a feeling that he gave Rachel to him in a week. And Jacob did so and fulfilled her week. And he gave him Rachel, his daughter, to wife. And Lavan gave Rachel his daughter Bilhah, his handmaid, to be her handmaid. So now he gave another servant. And he went in also to Rachel, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet another 7 years. But the Lord saw that Rachel was hated, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren.
With Leah, Leah was.
Yeah, he didn't love Leah.
No, okay, you said Rachel. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Leah was hated, and he opened her womb,
Right.
but Rachel remained barren. Every time a womb was opened, the child would be a special one. And here Leah conceived and bore a son, and she called his name Reuben, Reuven, for the Lord has seen my affliction, for now my husband will love me. So obviously here Leah was deeply hurt by the fact that even though she was married to him, she knew he didn't love her. And that's very hard for a woman, to marry someone who you know doesn't love you. And it's interesting also that if you look back up here, that Lavan gave Rachel Bilhah. Where is it? Zilpah was for Leah, and Bilhah was for, anyway, can't find it. Bilhah was, here, Laban gave Rachel his daughter, Bilhah, his handmaid. So they were very close, and they lived together. And later we will see that Reuben will have a relationship with Bilhah. And she conceived again and bore a son, and said, because the Lord has heard that I am hated, he has therefore given me this son also. And she called him Shimon, which is he heard, or she was heard. Shimon is God has heard. And she conceived again and bore a son. Now this time, she's convinced, this time my husband will stay with me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, his name was Levi, my heart. And she conceived again and bore a son. And she called, this time, will I praise the Lord. She called his name Yehudah, and she stopped bearing. So the word Yehudah, from which later we'll see, even though he's the 4th son of Jacob, he's one to be in the line of the kings. And Yehudah, where we get Yehudim, the Jews, means praise the Lord. I will praise the Lord. And when Rachel saw that she couldn't bear Jacob any children, she envied her sister. And she said to Jacob, give me children or I will die. And Jacob was angry with Rachel. He said, am I in God's stead? Who has withheld from thee the fruit of the womb? It was God who's holding it back, not him. And she said, she did exactly what Sarah did, which was a custom of the day. Take my maid, Bilhah, go into her, that she may bear upon my knees. And I think that's literally what would happen. She would hold the woman as she was having a child, and the child would be given to her. It would be as if like a surrogate mother. And she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and Jacob went into her. And Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Boy, I can't imagine how Rachel was feeling. And Rachel said, God hath judged me, but he also heard my voice and has given me a son. So she named him Dan. And Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, conceived again and bore Jacob a 2nd son. And Rachel said, with mighty wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister and have prevailed. And she named him Naphtali, which means wrestling. When Leah saw that she had left off bearing, she took Zilpah, her handmaid, and gave her to Jacob to wife. And Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, bore Jacob a son. His name was Gad, which means fortune has come. And Zilpah, Leah's handmaid, bore Jacob a second son. Boy, was he busy. And Leah said, I'll name his name Asher. Ashrei, as we say. Happy is the person, Ashrei. For the daughters will call me happy. So now she has 6. And Reuben went in the day of the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I beg you, from your son's mandrakes. Now I looked up mandrakes. Now I remember seeing a movie which was quite occult, and mandrakes it almost looks like ginger, but it's literally shaped like a man. It has like 2 arms, 2 legs, and it was used as a fertility rite. They would either put it under the pillow or under the bed, and it was said that they would become pregnant, or they would make some kind of a tea from it. It was like used as an aphrodisiac. And she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken away my husband? Would you now take away my son's mandrakes also? And I thought, why would her son Reuben need mandrakes? Maybe that's why he got hot for Bilhah, because
No,
he
but
was.
I didn't understand that mandrakes were an aphrodisiac. I thought they were more of something for her, for fertility, not for Reuben. That's what I thought.
That's why I was surprised. What is Reuben doing with mandrakes?
But he went to get them for her.
How do you know?
Didn't he say that? She said,
No, all it says is Reuben went in the days of the wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field. Oh yeah, brought them to his mother,
Leah,
yeah. Right.
So it's not an aphrodisiac. I think it's a fertility thing.
But it's also an aphrodisiac.
Oh, okay.
It's also known as that. I was doing some research before.
Okay.
And Rachel said to Leah, give me some of your son's mandrakes. And Rachel said, therefore, he shall lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. She's bargaining with him. And Jacob came from the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have hired you with my son's mandrakes. In other words, I bought you tonight. And he lay with her that night. And Jacob listened to Leah. And no, God heard Leah. And she conceived and bore Jacob a 5th son. And Leah said, God has given me my hire, because I gave my handmaid to my husband, and she called his name Issachar. And Leah conceived again and bore a 6th son to Jacob. And Leah said, God has endowed me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. And she calls his name Zebulun. And afterwards she bore a daughter and called her name Dinah. And we'll hear a lot about Dinah. Rarely are women mentioned unless they play a role in the scriptures. So we see just from this whole scenario, just how women had their identity by having children, how important it was for them. It's not the same today. Today, women don't even want to have children. And God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened her and opened her womb. He finally heard her, and she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And she called his name Yosef, saying, the Lord has added to me another son. But this truly was hers. The others were her handmaid Bilhah's. And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Yosef, that Yaakov said to Lavan, send me away that I may go to my own place and to my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served you. Let me go, for you know my service with which I have served you. And Laban said to him, if I have found favor in your eyes, and I have read the signs right, and the Lord has blessed me for your sake. And he said, tell me your wages. What do you want? And I'll give it to you. And he said to him, you know how I have served you, and how your cattle have grown because of me. For it was little which you had before I came. You didn't have much when I came. And you have multiplied, your cattle have multiplied abundantly. The Lord has blessed you wherever I turned. And now, now it's time for me to provide for my own house. And he said, what shall I give you? And Jacob said, you don't have to give me anything. Just do this thing for me. I will again feed your flock and keep it. I'll take care of it. But I'm going to pass through all your flock today, and I'm going to remove every speckled and spotted one, and every dark one among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and they shall be mine. So he was going to get the speckled, the spotted ones, and the dark ones. So shall my righteous witness against me hereafter, when you shall come to look over what I've taken that is before you. Every one that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and the dark ones among the sheep, if you found them with me, it's as if they're stolen. So that's all he asked for. And Laban said, behold, let it be according to your word. And he removed that day the he-goats that were streaked and spotted. Look how deceitful he is. This is Laban. That day, he took away the male goats that were streaked and spotted, and the female goats that were speckled and spotted, and everyone that had white in it, and all the dark ones among the sheep, and he gave them to his sons. And he said, go 3 days' journey, put 3 days' journey between him and Jacob. And Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. But Jacob took rods of fresh poplar, and of the almond, and of the plane tree, and he peeled white streaks in them, making the white appear which was in the rods. And he set the rods which he had peeled over against the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs where the flocks came to drink. And they conceived when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived at the sight of the rods, and the flocks brought forth streaked, speckled, and spotted. Now this can only be from God. And Jacob separated the lambs. He also set the faces of the flocks toward the streaked and all the dark in the flock of Laban, and put his own droves apart, and did not put them in Laban's flocks. And it came to pass, whenever the stronger of the flock conceived, Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the flock in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. So when the flocks were feeble, he didn't put them in. But the feebler ones were Laban's, and the stronger ones were Jacob's. And the man increased exceedingly. He had large flocks, and maidservants, and men servants, and camels, and donkeys. And he heard the word of Laban's son, saying, Jacob has taken away all that was our father's. Of that which was our father's, he has gotten all this wealth, which wasn't true, but that's always what people do.
But let me just understand. What happened before is something, it's just saying basically God was doing that.
Oh, that's totally miraculous.
Because I never understood like what that means. They looked at the rods and
exactly. It had to do totally. It's what?
Well, it's almost like a myth or something, but it's really saying that God was doing the work.
Exactly.
Because I mean, rods and spots, and I would read it 1,000 times and say, I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, well, but because you see how deceitful Laban was, the ones that Jacob asked for,
he took away.
He took away. So now it was the time that the flock would conceive. So he put those rods that he peeled certain things in front of the when they were drinking and feeding. How is it that they had streaked and speckled? It had to be from God.
Yeah.
And Jacob saw Laban's face, and behold, it was not toward him as before, because you could see that they were all talking behind Jacob's back, and they were plotting. And the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field, to his flock. He told them to come, he didn't speak to them at home. He said, come out in the field, and said to them, I see your father's face. It's not like he was before, but the God of my father has been with me. And you know that with all my power, I have served your father. And your father has mocked me and changed my wages 10 times. But God suffered him not to hurt me. And he said thus, the speckled shall be your wages. Then all the flock bore speckled. And if he said thus, the streak shall be your wages, then the flock bore streaked. Thus God has taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. And it came to pass at the time that the flock was conceived, that I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream. And behold, the male goats which leaped upon the flock were streaked, speckled, and grizzled. And the angel of God said to me in a dream, Jacob? And I said, here I am. Oh, this is what had happened. God showed him in a dream. And he said, lift up your eyes and see all the male goats which leap upon the flocks are streaked, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel. He's the one he had seen when he had that first dream, where you did anoint your matzeva, where you did make a vow to me. Remember, he vowed that whatever he had, he would give to him. And that if God would only give him clothes and food, and he would believe in him. So now arise, go out from this land and return to the land of your birth. And Rachel and Leah answered and said to him, is there any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not accounted by him strangers? For he sold us and has quite devoured our price. For all the riches which God has taken away from our father, that is ours and our children. Now then, whatever God has said to do, do. And Jacob rose up, set his sons and his wife upon the camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all his substance which he had gathered, the cattle of his getting, which he gathered in Padan Aram, to go to his Isaac his father, to the land of Canaan. Now Laban had gone to shear his sheep. Remember, these sons were also 3 days away, 3 days' journey away. And Laban had gone. Now Rachel stole the teraphim, the household gods that belonged to her father. And Jacob outwitted Laban the Aramean, in that he didn't tell him that he had fled. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward the mountain of Gilead. And it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob had fled. So already you have, I don't know how much time has gone by since the flocks and since they were gone, but it must have been a while. And he took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey. So they were ahead at least 7 days. And he overtook him in the mountain of Gilead. And God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream of the night and said to him, be careful that you do not speak to Jacob, either good or bad. So we see God can speak to anyone. To a believer or a non-believer, it doesn't matter. If God chooses to speak to someone, he'll speak to him. And Laban came up with Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mountain, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mountain of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done? Why have you outwitted me and carried away my daughters as though they were captives of the sword? Why did you flee in secret and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me? I would have sent you away with joy and with songs and with music. Yeah, sure. And you didn't even allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters, my grandchildren. You've been foolish. It is in the power of my hand to harm you. But the God of your father spoke to me last night and said, be careful that you do not speak to Jacob either good or bad. And now that you're surely gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, why have you stolen my gods? And Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, lest you should take your daughters from me by force. With whomever you, now here, we have to be so careful when we make vows before God. Whomever you find your gods, with whomever you find your gods, he shall not live. He didn't know that Rachel was doing that. And we've seen this later in the scriptures when people make a foolish vow and they have to keep their word. Because we see later that Rachel would die way too early. Before our brethren look for what is yours and what is mine and take it. Take whatever it is that you think is yours, because Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen them. And Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent, into the tent of the two maidservants, and he didn't find them. And he left Leah's tent and entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the teraphim and put them in the saddle of the camel and sat on them. And Laban went all around the tent and did not find them. And she said to her father, don't be angry, my lord, that I can't rise up, for the manner of women is upon me. In other words, she had her period, so she's not going to get up. And he searched. Of course, he wouldn't search there. And he did not find the teraphim. And Jacob was angry, and he fought with Laban. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what have I done wrong? What's my sin that you so hotly pursued after me? Whereas you felt about all my stuff, what have you found of all your household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and your brethren, that they may judge between us. These 20 years have I been with you. Your ewes and your she-goats have not cast their young. You haven't lost one young. The rams of your flock I haven't eaten. Whatever was torn by beasts, I didn't bring to you. I bore the loss of it. From my hand did you require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. Thus I was in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep, I couldn't sleep. It fled from my eyes. These 20 years have I been in your house. I have served you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flock. And you have changed my wages 10 times. It's interesting, 6 years for your flock. It seems that it was overnight that all those things happened, where the sheep were speckled. But look, it was 6 years, 6 more years. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac has been on my side. Surely you would have sent me away empty-handed. God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and gave judgment last night. And Laban answered and said to Jacob, the daughters are my daughters, the children are my children, the flock are my flock, and all that you see is mine. What can I do this day for these daughters or for their children whom they have borne? Now come, let's make a covenant, a brit, you and I. and let it be for a witness between me and you. Jacob took a stone and set up another matzeva. And God said to his brothers, gather stones, and they took stones and made a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Lavan called it Yigad Sahadut. Let me see, Yigad Sahaduta. But Jacob called it Galid, because that means a heap. And I think I read that it's still, you can still see those stones there today. And Lavan said, this heap is a witness between me and you this day. Therefore was the name of it called Galid. And Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and you when we are absent from one another. If you should do any harm to my daughters, if you shall take wives beside my daughters, no man being with us, see, God is a witness between me and you. And Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have set between me and you. This heap shall be a witness, and this matzeva will be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to you, and you shall not pass over this heap and this pillar to me for harm. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. And his father's name was Nahor. Interesting, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. I don't know what that means. I didn't have a chance to look that up, but that would be an interesting, well, we know his father feared God, maybe that's what it means. Or that he was just much stronger, Isaac, than Lavan. Jacob
But
offered
sort of almost saying, says, you shall not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. So they're both afraid of being attacked by well, it sounds like they're making a vow not to harm each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Jacob offered a sacrifice at the mountain and called his brethren to eat, and they did eat and tarried all night in the mountain. And now it's just 3 more verses. And early in the morning, Lavan rose up, kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them. And Lavan departed and returned to his place. And Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. Interesting, eh? The angels of God met him. And Jacob said when he saw them, this is God's camp. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. A Mahana is a camp. And that is the end of this week's portion. It's quite, it is. It's very, it is very special, as they all are, all special portions. And as always, in every portion, we see that even if Jacob was a deceiver, he paid for it by being deceived, but God was with him. There's none of us that are perfect. God is with us. And we see God, we can see God working in people's lives even when they don't. Yeah. So it's for us today to understand that yes, God is with us no matter what we do. We suffer consequences, but he will never leave us or forsake us. And our heritage is so rich with wonderful stories. Do you have anything that stood out to you, Miriam, before we close for this evening?
Oh, okay. Jerry's not coming back.
I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. No, just, here he is. Speak of well, not the devil, but the half.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No. It's just it's such a beautiful passage in the picture of God and His forgiveness, even with all the things we've done, as you just said. with the deceit and the fighting, and the blah blah blah. You know, we're a worse judge of ourselves sometimes than God is of us.
Always.
I know in my case, it's the case. You know, it's God is bigger than our pettiness.
Yeah, and we can see that. You know, Lavan's deceit didn't stop with Jacob. Jacob was willing to follow God. Lavan was not.
Yeah.
And he was left with nothing.
Even in even some, when I think about it sometimes, even in the passages where, you know, he puts on animal skins, his mother and him, and they deceived their father, etc. Even there, I'm not 100% sure the motives were bad. It's just they had a lack of trust. It was told her that the younger shall serve, the older shall serve.
Exactly. But
So
it's the same with Sarah.
He did it because he didn't believe. I think they were. How often do we do things without waiting for God? It's not necessarily because we don't believe in God. It's just we're scared, or is it really going to happen? It's trust issues.
Yeah.
And
Miriam, put yourself in the middle. Go in the middle of the screen. Yeah. Better.
I think that's what's happened.
Yeah, no, you're right. But the issue is always about trust. And we end up doing things the wrong way because we don't trust, like Sarah, who gave Hagar to Abraham, the same story over and over again. When we don't trust and we go ahead of God in our own plans, and that's very difficult even today, because sometimes I'll get an idea and I want to do something, but I have to wait and see, God, is this something that I'm going to be wasting my time with? Is it really from me? Is it from you? And you just begin. You start doing something, and either doors will open or doors will close. We see God is blessing or he isn't. Yeah. So Jerry, I don't know if you heard any of the portion tonight. Okay, so we won't go into it, but it was a very interesting one. So on that note, we'll say good evening. And I'm really hoping, my desire in reading through the Torah in a language that we understand will help us to see that God speaks to us, to each of us today, about real people, that the stories of the people in the scriptures, in the Torah, they're not superheroes, but they're there to show us, to give us an example of what to do right and what not to do. Even today, I was speaking to a lady, and she said, I see all these things that are going on in the world. She's from Iran. Actually, was my hairdresser. As you see, my hair is cut. And she's watching what's happening in Iran. And she says, I hate the religion. They are killing people. They're killing young people. It is so horrible there. And she says, all the religions in the world, they're so horrible. And she says, but God doesn't want that. But where is he? Where is God today? How is he not doing something? And basically I said to her, God is watching. God tells us what we should do, what we could do to make things right with our brother, to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, how he gave us the commandments. And I told her, if you tell your children, do not play with the stove, don't play with fire, and you warn them and you show them, and then as soon as your back is turned, they go and they play with the stove and they get hurt, is it your fault? And she says, no, you're right. And I told her about the 10 commandments. I enunciated each one. And I said, that's all we need. If we would just keep those, all these things that are happening in the world would not be happening. But it's a process, and we can only start with ourselves. But my desire, by reading this Torah, by us reading it, it's a little bit like, I remember our rabbi saying, when he was in the Secret Service, he worked with the government. He said, when they would teach somebody about counterfeit money, they never looked at the counterfeit money for the first few years. They only studied the real thing, real money. And then as soon as they were introduced the counterfeit money, that's when they could recognize it. So it's the same with us. If we know the truth of Torah, and it's for all the world, if we know the truth of Torah, we will recognize all the counterfeit teachings out there. And we just have to say, not for me, nicht for mir. You know, we're in this world, we're not of it, and we have to be a light in it. And with that, I say good night. Good night, Jerry. I'm sorry you missed it, but I'll send you the recording so you can listen at a later date. Miriam, as always, it's always a delight to talk with you and to get your feedback.
Thank you.
So I wish you, everybody, a wonderful rest of the week and a Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.